Truss has been a prominent figure in British politics. Starting her political journey as an MP, she quickly climbed the ranks, holding several key ministerial positions before reaching the pinnacle as Prime Minister. Despite her brief tenure at 10 Downing Street, her policies on economic reforms and international relations left a lasting mark. Join us as we explore the highs and lows of her political journey, encapsulating a career filled with ambition and controversy.
Welcome to the broadcast. Would NATO lose a war with Russia without the United States?
I don't believe so, no. I believe that Russia is ultimately not capable of winning. What I worry about is the human cost of what it would take to defeat Russia.
Was Brexit a mistake?
No, it was the right thing to do.
But you were not always for Brexit.
No.
What changed?
I think when I first went into politics, there were specific things I wanted to change. I thought the British economy was flagging, that it needed to be turbocharged, that we needed more pro-business policies. I felt that our education system wasn't good enough. We needed more rigour in our schools so that children had those opportunities in life. But I didn't understand how difficult it had become to get things done. And I didn't understand the impact that being in the European Union had actually had on the British state, you know, the officials, the civil service. So I think leaving the European Union has been a liberation. I just didn't realise how bad it had got.
Would the United Kingdom fight with the United States against an attack on China, on Taiwan?
Well, I believe we absolutely should be there defending Taiwan and giving Taiwan all the support we can. I want us to send weapons to Taiwan. I've been very clear about that, because if Taiwan fell, that would be a disaster for free democracies around the world. But realistically, the United States is the greater power.
You know, I was in preparation for having the honor to sit down with you today, I was asking questions to people on the street. And I was saying, if you had an opportunity to sit down with a former prime minister, what would you ask? And one of the most interesting questions I got was, when will the United Kingdom return the Parthenon marbles to Greece stolen by Lord Elgin?
Well, I don't believe we should return those marbles to Greece. I believe that they are being well looked after in the British Museum, and I think if you start to say we have to repatriate everything that's been acquired in our country, then I think you're on a very dangerous trajectory. And you know, we have lots of people in Britain and also in America sort of saying that the history of our countries is a bad thing, that somehow, you know, we got where we were through bad practices. Actually, I think that the UK and America have given a huge amount to the world, and we should be proud of the development of democracy. I describe in my book that America is Britain's greatest invention, and I still believe that. I think the things we believe in, like freedom, truth, science, rigour, liberty, those are really, really important principles, and I don't believe that we should be trying to undo that past. I think instead we should be trying to build a more positive future.
Should Scotland have the right to another independence referendum?
Well, if you remember at the time, Armstrong, the SNP said it would be a once-in-a-generation referendum, and the last one was in 2014. So I don't think we're within that generation yet. You know, of course, if the people of Scotland do want to leave the United Kingdom, you know, they have that right. We gave them the referendum. David Cameron gave them the referendum, but it's not a generation, and I don't think the vote should keep happening every so often. And what we've had is the SNP have massively let down Scotland. I went to primary school in Scotland, where I got a very good education in subjects like English and maths. It's been trashed by the SNP. It's now some of the worst education you can get in Britain, because they've adopted all of these woke policies. They've adopted these ludicrous ideas about 100 genders in the school, and they're not focused on making the country great. And I think that's a huge problem.
Should the UK send asylum seekers to Rwanda, given their deplorable human rights records?
Well, I don't agree with that that description of Rwanda, and I do think it is the right policy, because at present we have floods of illegal immigrants coming into the United Kingdom. We don't have any way of deterring those illegal immigrants, and that is what the Rwanda policy is all about. And I've visited Rwanda. The Home Secretary's been to Rwanda. It's a perfectly safe country. They have perfectly good accommodation for these illegal immigrants to be put into. And what is so unfair at the moment is we have these floods of illegal immigrants coming into Britain. They then are able to access the British welfare state, housing, education, and people in Britain rightly feel resentful of why have these people who contributed nothing to our country able to access those services. And I think that's detrimental to our society.
It's as if you're describing the current crisis in our country and how people feel about the invasion on our borders.
But it's the same thing going on, because what you have is you have a bunch of left-wing do-gooders who say, you know, I'm living comfortably off in London, and I don't really care if these people are coming into our country. I want a virtue signal by showing I'm a nice person. You know, we have lefty lawyers who are pursuing these cases using the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. And what is essentially happening is those migrants are now being moved into hotels in Britain. So people who used to be able to visit those hotels for their holidays can't get a booking because they're full of asylum seekers. Yet the liberal elite in Britain is quite happy for this to continue so they can feel good about themselves. And I think that people are getting more and more frustrated. And in my constituency in Norfolk, the #1 issue on the doorstep is illegal immigration.
Should the United Kingdom send Julian Assange to the UK for trial? And would that precedent sort of impair what you would consider to be a free press?
I'm struggling to remember the ins and outs of the Julian Assange situation, to be honest with you, Armstrong. I couldn't really comment on that. Sorry.
So let me come back.
Of all the many, I've never had any direct dealings with the issue myself, and I'm struggling to.
I think Americans appreciate your candor because no one knows about every issue, so that's fair. Another question in preparation for this sit down, which is very interesting. They asked, because we have this issue in the United States, should the United Kingdom pay reparations to former colonies in Africa, what they took on as their theft, and resources like what Germany paid for genocide in Namibia?
No is the answer. No. I mean, as I've said, I'm proud of Britain as a country. I think we're a great country. Of course, we've made mistakes in the past, but I challenge you to name a country on earth that hasn't made mistakes in the past.
And will continue to make mistakes.
What I think is bad is if we spend our time raking over what happened in the past rather than learning from it for the future. And, you know, I'm somebody who believes in everybody from whatever walk of life their background is having the opportunity to succeed. And if we're spending all our time trying to relitigate battles of 100 years ago, 200 years ago, where does it lead? It leads to resentment. And one of the terrible things I think's happened in the last 30 or 40 years in both Britain and America is the development of identity politics. This idea that your skin colour is more important than what your talents are, what your beliefs are. And it's the opposite of what we should be advocating. And I think it's a divisive, destructive agenda, and it's coming from people who want to undermine our civilization. That's what these people want to do. You know, one day they're questioning the British Empire, the next day they're questioning whether a man is a man and a woman is a woman. You know, the next day they're questioning, you know, basic mathematics. You know, we have to take these people on and say, enough is enough. We need to make our countries better. We don't need to rake over the past.
You know, you loaded a lot in that answer. You know, people like to emphasize that your tenure as British Prime Minister was the shortest in history. But if you think about your hero, Margaret Thatcher, she was also summarily ousted. Now, where am I going with this? Do you think
does seem to be a habit in Britain, doesn't it?
No, but where I'm going with this, could that be because you are a woman, and if you were not, it would not have happened?
Like, it's very hard to tell because I've never been a man, so I don't know what the I don't have an alternative reality.
But you understand the deeper question.
And by the way, the Conservative Party has got rid of quite a lot of leaders, namely Boris Johnson as well, Theresa May as well. So it's not a unique thing that I've been through. What was unique is how short it was in my time in office, and what I faced wasn't just people in the Conservative Party who didn't support my policies. I also faced absolute ruthless undermining of my agenda by the establishment. So that is what I think the biggest cause is. The biggest cause is there are a group of people who like the way things are. They like the status quo, and they didn't want change. And you know, maybe the fact I was a woman was part of it. Maybe the fact that I'm not a sort of posh Brit. You know, I went to a comprehensive school. I'm the first Prime Minister, in fact, to have gone to, you know, an average school in Britain. Who knows what the factors were.
But you're also the first woman in history, in its 1,000-year history, that was named Lord Chancellor.
Yes.
It's amazing. Explain to our American audience how historic that was.
Well, the thing about being Lord Chancellor, it's a job that's been going for 1,000 years, and I was the first woman to be appointed in that job. I have to say, though, that to me, what's more important is what I actually do in these jobs, rather than holding the title. So, you know, people often say you're the first woman to do this or you're a woman to do that. What I care about is delivering the Conservative policies. That's what motivates me. So I'm not really thinking about that in that way.
Fair enough. 10 years to save the West. This is what it's all about. I'm Armstrong Williams. This is the Armstrong Williams Show. And we're so honored to have the former Prime Minister and still a member of the UK Parliament, the Honourable Liz Truss, join us as our exclusive guest for the full hour. We'll be back. "10 years to save the West, a leftist education." I was fascinated over the fact that your parents were liberal, and when you did decide to run for office, your mother campaigned for you, but your father didn't. And then all of a sudden you headed all these democratic organizations, and all of a sudden you had an epiphany. What happened?
In terms of why I moved to be a conservative?
Yes.
So back in the 1980s, my mum was a campaigner for the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. So she wanted to get American missiles out of Britain. and she was quite anti-American. She was probably one of the few Brits who talked about Caspar Weinberger, who was Reagan's defense secretary.
Yeah.
I knew about that when I was a child.
Wow.
But as I grew up, I started questioning what was happening, and I saw that it was the strength of Thatcher and Reagan that brought down the Soviet Union. It wasn't by giving in to them. It wasn't by getting rid of our weapons. It was actually the strength that delivered. So I watched what my parents said, but I thought for myself about what was actually happening. And that's why I got interested in politics in the first place. And then it was a while before I became a conservative, because I didn't really want to admit it, because a lot of my parents' friends were left-wing. Everyone I knew was left-wing. You know, we lived in a city of Leeds. It was all very liberal. And admitting you were a conservative was like, say, you had two heads.
But early on, your parents spent time in Warsaw, and that had a profound impact on them.
Well, they had they thought communism wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And my dad went, I mean, I was only 2 when we went to Warsaw, but when they had to stand in queues to get basic food, and when they couldn't afford very much on the salary, they then had second thoughts about communism. So I think being in Warsaw in the 1970s put them off.
There's one thing that comes across in your book, 10 Years to Save the West, is that there could be no compromise when it comes to returning to conservative values. Explain that.
Well, what I've seen happen is I do have very strongly held conservative values, and because I was brought up in the left, I had to think for myself, and I thought, what is the right thing? And what are the principles I believe in? And I believe in freedom. I believe in the nation state. I believe that Britain is a great country and can become even better. And those are the things that I hold very dear. And when I see conservatives who kowtow to the left, I think, well, why are you even in the Conservative Party? So, for example, on environmentalism, you know, saying that we need these net zero regulations and that we won't even think about what it's going to cost ordinary people. I think we've been pushed into that by left-wing environmental campaigners, or the whole transgender agenda. You know, we've had people in the Conservative Party saying trans women are women. Well, they're clearly not. And so what I think it is that Conservatives have been scared to really say what they think, because the left have been so virulent and so pushy, and they've tried to sort of make it socially unacceptable to be a conservative. So that's why I'm saying that we need to stand up to those people.
You know, you said, and I'm going back to your book, is that we need to focus on long-term future of the Conservative Party. You said we have to know what we believe in and hold our representatives accountable for their actions. That's something that you just spoke to. But you go on to say is that we need to bring power back to the people and stop thinking that big government and the deep state are our friends.
Yeah, there are too many conservatives who believe that if only they get into a ministerial job, they will be able to change the people, that they will somehow be able to get their policies done. And what I'm saying to conservatives is I tried. I tried for 10 years. I was in lots of different government departments, education, justice, environment, the Treasury.
Foreign Secretary.
Foreign Secretary. I even got into number 10 Downing Street. And what I'm saying is with the current system we have, with the power that unelected bureaucrats have and the agencies have, it is not possible to deliver conservative policies until we actually change the system and the people in those jobs.
But let me stop you, because what is fascinating, when you speak of the deep state, you're speaking of something totally different from here. Because what you're saying, that there's very little you could change the bureaucracy that you inherited in all the positions that you're in. And through a lot of these organizations where very few people make the decisions for many, and it's hard to change that process no matter who you are.
So in America, the president can appoint 3,000 senior people in the government. In Britain, the Prime Minister only gets to appoint 100 people.
Wow.
And those people aren't even senior people. They're advisors. They're not in the chain of command. So all of the key people in our bureaucracy are permanent civil servants, permanent officials. And I think in the past it's worked better than it does now. But what I think we're seeing is the bureaucracy is becoming increasingly politicized. And we've got activists in our bureaucracy now, people who are environmental zealots or people who are
climate change zealots.
Climate change zealots, or they're obsessed with gender ideology, or they're
DEI,
or DEI, or in the Home Office, which is our department that deals with immigration, they hate the idea of deporting illegal immigrants, and they've actually joined the Home Office to stop illegal immigrants being deported. I mean, this is the kind of people we now have operating in our bureaucracy.
So you go on to say institutions need to be held accountable for their action, including, which is something you're very familiar with, big banking, the World Health Organizations, because you feel they hurt millions of people, were devastated during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Absolutely, and I feel that the World Health Organization in particular was heavily under the influence of China. And this is what we've seen in many of these big multilateral organizations like the United Nations as well. I believe the organizations we can trust are the ones that have free democracies in them. So NATO, for example, I think is an effective organization. But how on earth can we trust a Security Council when two of the members are China and Russia? These are the countries that are seeking to do us harm. So I think we need to be realistic about who is actually running these organizations and whether they're helping the West or actually undermining us.
You talk a lot about restoring conservative leadership in the West and combining forces with our goals and our conservative allies. But one of the things you talk a lot about, and I want you to explain in more detail, you said we need to restore the nation state.
We do. So Brexit was part of restoring the nation state. That is why people in Britain voted for Brexit. They didn't want to be told what to do by unelected EU bureaucrats. The problem is they're now being told what to do by unelected British bureaucrats, and they don't like that very much either. But the EU is a body like that. But what we're now finding, and Britain is part of the European Convention of Human Rights, is we're now being told what to do by judges in Strasbourg. So even though we've left the European Union, we are still subject to the controls of other international bodies. And the nation state is what people feel part of. People feel they're British. They don't feel they're part of the ECHR. They don't feel they're part of the United Nations. They feel British. And that is what we need to restore.
You go on to say appeasing our enemies never work. You say that we need to assert the virtues of the free world and crack down on China, Russia, and other enemies.
That's right. I mean, we've just seen Janet Yellen in China again. Again. We've seen American corporations kowtowing to President Xi. These people are not our friends. And if you go back to what happened in the Cold War, President Reagan called out the Soviet Union as the evil empire. When are we going to see President Biden call out China in those terms?
What are your thoughts? I know the headlines since you've been in the United States on your tour referring to the president as ignorant. Now, some people may take that as offensive, but I, as a broadcast owner and host, want to know, what do you think, what is ignorant about, because I know you're talking about his policies, policies that absolutely don't work and can prove to be futile.
And what I've seen, and I served in the British cabinet under both President Trump and President Biden, so I've seen what the difference looks like. And the world does not fear President Biden. China, Russia and Iran have increased in their belligerence since, for example, on Iran, the sanctions were taken off. The sanctions were taken off Iran. Biden suggested that we could renegotiate the nuclear deal with Iran. And what have we seen happening? We've seen an increasingly aggressive Iran. We saw the appalling attacks on Israel, the recent failed attacks over the last weekend. And that is essentially an appeasement strategy. It's an appeasement strategy if you don't show strength to the aggressor. Instead, you try and do deals with them. And it's not just the United States. I think Europe has not spent enough on defence, by a significant amount. I mean, most European countries aren't even spending the 2% NATO requirement. Back in the Cold War, we were spending 4 or 5% of our GDP on defence. And I think we've all been hugely complacent about the level of threat we face. And the only thing these authoritarian dictators understand is strength. That is the only thing they understand. And any time we try and cut a deal or take off sanctions or try and blame Israel for what's happened. I mean, I get very frustrated when I hear that Israel should be restrained in what they're doing. They are facing an existential threat to their future.
Hold that. I want to come back to this. The former Prime Minister of the UK, Liz Truss, is joining us, and she is not holding back. And we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. The point about, and I want to continue with Israel, was about the taxes with President Biden.
Yeah.
Give us your assessment of the burgeoning conflict. You touched on it between Israel and Iran, and what you think needs to happen.
Well, what I think needs to happen is we need to 100% back Israel. And I worry about statements saying that Israel should hold back or they should show restraint. The fact is that Iran is threatening their very existence as a nation. And we should back them wholeheartedly.
But should they respond to Iran's onslaught of over 500 missiles? Some Ms. Truss, which even flew over the holy city of Jerusalem, and in a place for all three of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. How far should they go? Should they be measured? Considering
I'm not going to advise Israel on their military strategy. They're in a much better position to say than me exactly how they should respond. But what I would observe is that the United States should not be holding them back in their response. We should not be saying, you've had it okay, we managed to deal with that onslaught, because what we know is that when authoritarian regimes feel that there isn't a response, and this was what happened with Obama and the red line in Syria, when they feel there isn't a response, they then push further. So this is why I'm saying that Israel should be free to pursue the strategy they need to pursue in order to protect themselves against Iran.
In your book, on page 109, chapter 7, Liberty, Equality, and Wokery, you say the United Kingdom and the United States share a unique heritage of freedom. We are exceptional, but you feel it is threatened.
I do. I feel that those values that we believe in, that are deeply embedded, right from Magna Carta to the Bill of Rights to the American Constitution, I feel those values are being undermined. They're being undermined in our schools. They're being undermined in our universities. The very idea of truth and the Enlightenment and the importance of truth is being undermined today by leftists who don't believe in any of that stuff. They don't believe in the idea that our way of life is the right way of life and actually is delivered huge opportunity and prosperity for millions and millions of people.
Why do you believe the world is at war?
I believe the world is at war because the West was complacent. We were complacent. After the end of the Cold War, we kind of thought freedom's won, free enterprise has won, America, all of its allies, we've been successful, our way of life has been proven right. And we allowed the Putin regime to develop. Do you remember Putin was even invited to the G8 at one point?
While he was carrying on.
Exactly.
In Ukraine.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. We allowed China to get rich and powerful. Back in the 1990s, the Chinese economy was only a tenth the size of the American economy. It's now purchasing power parity with America because we let China into the WTO. We didn't insist they followed the same rules that countries like America and Britain have to follow. And on the subject of Iran, again, we allowed them to get away with building up this capacity to have a nuclear weapon. So it's been our complacency that has meant that these evil regimes have felt empowered. They've felt empowered to do what they are now doing.
You spoke about Iran. What preventative steps should be taken to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear nation? Our intelligence communities note that they're likely at 60% with their uranium enrichment program.
Well, we need to get much tougher. We've got to abandon all this idea that there will be some kind of nuclear deal with Iran. I support the approach President Trump took when he was last in office of the tough sanctions on Iran. And we need to also be tougher on China, who are bypassing a lot of the Iranian sanctions. I mean, these regimes are working together. We saw Hamas in Moscow. We've seen the Chinese and North Koreans supplying to Russia. And what they're doing is they're backing each other up. So we need to make it clear to China that if you want trade with the West, you can't be backing up the idea of Iran getting a nuclear weapon.
You talk in your book in chapter 4, which is another fascinating chapter, rough justice. You say there is going to be some in-fight turbulence. That was the warning I gave to Theresa May once I had found...
There certainly was. I got roundly trounced in the British press after I did what I did. So,
but
yes.
It was principle.
Yeah.
It was principle.
Because I don't see the point, Armstrong, of taking on a government job if you're not going to do something. If you're just going to go along with what the unelected bureaucrats think, what's the point of you being there if you're just a figurehead? I wanted to change things. That's why I went into politics, because I want to see a justice system that works. I wanted to deal with the problems in prison. I want the justice system to be accountable to Parliament, which I'm afraid it isn't as much as it used to be.
But you know, even though your being prime minister was short-lived, you remain in Parliament.
Yes.
Which tells you it's not about ego for you.
No.
You want to serve and make a difference.
I do. And in Britain, Parliament is the absolutely crucial crucible of where things happen. You know, I want to persuade as many of my colleagues as possible that how big the system changes need to be in Britain so we can make the changes. And the only place I can do that from is Parliament.
You know, in a recent interview, you endorsed former President Donald Trump because you said the world needs a strong America. You went on to say that our opponents feared when Donald Trump was in office more than President Biden. What made you draw that conclusion, and you think other world leaders agree and won't say it publicly?
Well, I have seen for myself the difference that having Donald Trump in the White House and having President Biden in the White House has made. I've seen that difference. You know, we've seen what's happened in Ukraine, with Israel and Iran, with China, and the approach has not been as tough.
Tell it.
The approach has not been as tough.
Let us see the difference.
I think that
show us the difference. Something simple that people can relate to.
Well, the Iranian sanctions. The Iranian sanctions were taken off. The line on China has got softer. You know, we didn't see all of these delegations of business people to China under President Trump. You know, he put tough restrictions on trade on China. Now, I personally didn't like some of the other restrictions he did, including on Britain. I was not happy about that. But on China, he sent a very clear message. And I think some people criticise Trump's rhetoric, but I think it got the message across to those leaders of those regimes that if they overstepped the mark, they didn't know what Trump would do.
Fear.
He was unpredictable.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's all too predictable what the response of the Biden administration will be to any action by one of those regimes.
What is it that we don't talk about enough that is looming, the media, people with influence, that scares you?
I'm scared by quite a lot of things at the moment. I think the prospect of war is very serious and very real, and we are still not doing enough on defence, and we are not doing enough to build up our defences. But I think the number one thing I'm worried about is the level of debt we're getting to in the West, and whether there is some kind of economic crisis. Because we've been spending money like there's no tomorrow. Taxes have gone up, which is making our economies more lethargic, particularly in Europe, less so in America. Although I don't think America's as dynamic as it could be. I think there needs to be more deregulation, more use of oil and gas in America, more fracking. But that's the thing that worries me most, is the lack of economic growth and the fact that our economies are shrinking relative to the whole world. And what we're seeing is China's economy is growing relative to the world. And ultimately, money talks.
Money talks.
You know, that's where does power ultimately come from? It comes from economic power.
You know, BRICS, Iran, Ethiopia, South Africa, China, Russia, just passed a resolution condemning Israel without mentioning the rockets that were propelled upon them during that raid in the last few days. I mean, should we take BRICS seriously?
Well, no.
Given that an anemic response?
Well, no, and those are a bunch of countries with very different objectives from each other. But we should absolutely take China seriously, and we should be much more strategic as the West in how we deal with China. What's going on at the moment is treasuries in many countries are prioritising short-term financial gain over our long-term security. So that's what worries me. I don't really worry about what statements these countries make. When I talk in my book about UN resolutions and how there's constant pressure for anti-Israel resolutions at the United Nations. And there's a lot of, I'm afraid, anti-Semitism going on. There are a lot of countries who are antagonistic towards Israel. But I do think that it's what we do that matters as much as resolutions that are passed at the UN.
The former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Liz Truss, is our guest. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, you once in your career talked about moving away from the monarchy. And so do you think there ever would come a time when the UK abandoned the royal family to align with what people would call the democratic precepts and the American Declaration of Independence? Because royalty is the opposite of meritocracy, which is the engine of civilization.
Well, I was young and ignorant. I made a speech when I was 19, calling for the abolition of the monarchy, and I do find it deeply strange, of course, that I was the Prime Minister who presided over the very sad death of Queen Elizabeth II, but also the welcoming of King Charles III to the throne. And I think I've learned over time that the way the British Constitution works, with parliamentary sovereignty at its core and a constitutional monarch, is actually very effective and has worked for our country for centuries. And in fact, the problems we're suffering today are that we've moved away from that we've taken the authority away from Parliament and we've given it to all these unelected bureaucrats. So I've become, over time, you know, as I said, I was young, I was contrarian, I was ignorant, and I was a bit of a rabble-rouser. And I've now come to see the value that our Constitution has. And I think the same is true of the American, you know, I think the American Constitution is a great invention. I'm proud of the fact that it was foreshadowed by things like Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights that we developed in the United Kingdom. And in fact, one of the people advocating for the American Revolution, Thomas Paine, actually comes from my constituency in Norfolk, and there's a big statue to him, a golden statue. So I'm very proud of that link and that heritage. And I think the American Constitution has proved to be so valuable. I think the one thing that I wish we had in Britain is the First Amendment on freedom of speech.
Wow.
I love the First Amendment, and you know, in Scotland we've had this ridiculous hate speech law passed. I don't know if you've been following J.K. Rowling calling it out is
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah, yeah.
You know, she is an absolute hero. She's called it out, but you know, that couldn't happen in America because of the First Amendment. So that I'm jealous of that.
You know, you spoke of former Queen Elizabeth, and obviously from September to October 2022, while it may have seemed fast-tracked for you as 51 and on the 51st day of your tenure as Prime Minister, people will always remember that you went to Balmoral Palace, which is rare, to be sworn in as Prime Minister without any knowledge that 2 days later the Queen would have met her demise. And as you spoke about the royal family, I could feel your emotions. Obviously, the Queen passing away had a profound impact on you.
I mean, the whole week was completely extraordinary. The weather had been very bad on the day that I was due to see Her Majesty. She was in Balmoral because she wasn't very well, and that was the first bad sign, was that I had to fly to Balmoral. And we flew through, my husband Hugh and I flew through a storm, and there was only one moment where the sky opened up with a tiny, you know, hole that the plane could fly through in order to land. At some points during the flight, we thought we weren't going to be able to land up near Balmoral in Scotland. So when I got there and saw Her Majesty, and she was in such fine fettle, she looked frail, but she was so alert, and we had a great conversation about everything that was happening in Britain. She gave me advice that maybe I should have heeded more, of pace yourself, about what I should be doing as Prime Minister. And she was so funny as well. I mean, she's a very funny person, and I met her before, and she was, you know, joking about what was going on, and I just had no idea that 2 days later she wouldn't be with us anymore. I mean, it was...
Well, I remember this scene when you were in the British Parliament and you were passed a note.
Yeah.
Talk about that moment.
Well, so on the day itself, I knew she wasn't well, but she said to me, "I'll see you again next week." I thought I had weeks or months of her advice, because I mean, what better advice could you have than somebody who's been on the throne for 70 years? I mean, her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill. She had literally seen it all. And, you know, I was looking forward to that, of learning from her, of talking to her about what was happening. And the next day, we had a virtual meeting of the Privy Council. So we were down in one of the secure rooms in the basement of number 10 Downing Street. And at 6 o'clock, we were told the Queen wouldn't be able to come. She wouldn't be able to attend from, you know, virtually from Balmoral. And that's when I thought, oh dear, you know, if she's not able to do that, that is a bad sign. And it was, we actually were announcing a major policy package the next day in Parliament. And it was just after I'd sat down to give my statement that I was passed a note by Nadim Zahawi saying, you know, you've got to go now. And I knew I knew it was ours then. And, you know, what I've subsequently heard is she actually, after our meeting, she had a very good evening, she had a good meal, and then the next day she was, you know, I think it felt like she was waiting to appoint me. And then...
So you were in a state of shock.
Yeah. And just, I think at the time there was so much going on. We had to get our policies in place because there had been a hiatus during the leadership election.
But also
there were very serious...
after a death, it was suspended for 10 days.
I know. But all of this stuff was going through my head. So you don't even really have time to take in what's happened, because you're just thinking, I've got to do this speech on, you know, on the steps of number 10 Downing Street. I've got to appoint the cabinet. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. So I was just in action mode. And it was only at the weekend that I went to a place called Chevening, which is the country house actually of the Foreign Secretary, and I was watching TV with my daughter, and I just burst into tears because it had all just got too much, to be honest. It was just...
And you had a reading at the funeral.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and your role as Prime Minister.
I think 15 billion people around the world watched that. You know, it was a huge... And
just imagine the time you were chosen to serve your country was the time of her demise. Obviously, the world will remember that moment and remember
It is a huge honour. It's a huge honour. I mean, she was such an admirable person, and just the duty that she showed. You know, even though she was not well, you know, everything that she did was perfect.
You know, 10 years to save the West. In 1 minute, why should someone go out and buy this book right away? Why is it must reading?
The West is in danger. You know, we know we're under threat inside our own countries from people who want to end our way of life. They want to take on our way of life. But we're also under threat from these authoritarian regimes around the world. We can see what's happening, you know, in Ukraine, in Israel, in Taiwan. And I believe we need to fight back as conservatives. And what I'm saying to people, this book is a warning. It's a warning for America, because I tried to take on those forces in Britain. I tried to take on the forces of the establishment, and I got trounced because I underestimated how big those forces were. So my warning to American conservatives is this is the mother of all fights that you are going to have, and we need you to win.
Well, listen.
We need you to win because we want the West to be saved.
Well, listen, you're not going anywhere anytime soon. Your strength and your presence and your contribution will only grow. It will not surprise me if you become Prime Minister again. I mean, you're so young. I mean, and yet so eloquent.
In American terms.
Well, it all depends on what the time needs. And the times in this world may need your leadership again. So remember the Queen's advice, patience. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for writing your book, The 10 Years to Save the West. The Honorable Liz Truss. I'm Armstrong Williams. Enjoy the remainder of your weekend. Thank you. One of my favorite interviews.